So welcome back. Now we can start the afternoon sessions. So we start with the presentation from Frédéric Mlanau on the measures that the technical boards agreed in order to improve citation in the official journal for harmonized standards, of course. And we will have a coffee break at 3:45. We plan to close on time at here it's written closing address 7:30. I guess 5 o'clock we plan to close the meeting. So please, Frédéric, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alberto. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a nice lunch break. So my name is Frédéric Mlanao. I'm account manager in the new team created almost 1 year ago, team called Harmonized Standard Compliance. And the goal of this team is to help with improving the citation of harmonized standard in the OJEU. And before reaching the citation, the goal is to help reach compliant assessment. In my new team, there's here in the room Mauro and Anda. We are a team of 3, where they contribute greatly to the quality checks and to the development of the new process, where we'll go through. We have quite some slides to cover. It will be a long presentation, so I propose to have an interactive session to have kind of a discussion. So instead of waiting the end of the presentation to raise your questions, please go ahead. If you have a question, just jump in. As well, I will invite my good friend Alberto to jump in to complement should I miss an important element in the presentation. So let's go. We start with a short glossary, but I think you are familiar with that already, since it's your second day. Most of the terms here, you know them, but they are there for later when you want to go through again. Start with the introduction. So the innovative process, this new process, is based on the outcomes of the ESO's EC task force on timely citation. It's a task force that put together the European Commission as well as the 3 ESOs to improve the timely citation of harmonized standards. The discussions within Strategy 2030 P1 and as well BT Working Group 12 and 14. 12 is dedicated to harmonized standards, and BT Working Group 14 dedicated to rules and processes. So the innovative process has been approved in September, and it applies to new work items launched for approval as of 1st of October of this year. It means that probably now, new work items that were created, new projects will be able to go through the innovative process. So again, applies to homegrown harmonized standards, and for work item developed under parallel work with ISO and IEC, it's actually under discussion with ISO and IEC, and we are busy fine-tuning the last operational steps for similar implementation. It will not be a strictly identical process, but the main ideas will be there. So I will go quick on these ones. Those are the BT decisions, the BT decision that approves the innovative process. 2 things here to highlight, important. This bullet point here. So the implementation of the changes to the necessary IT tools will not be completed by October 1st. It means that for the beginning of the innovative process, we follow a 2-step approach. It means at the beginning, we will have email exchanges of the documents, and when the IT tools are ready, then it will go through the submission interface, for example. But we decided to start implementing the innovative process to address the issues we have with the compliance, even though the IT tools are not ready. So 2-step approach for the process. As well, for the implementation, while the implementation of the IT tools is not there, we invite the technical bodies when setting the time frame of the development of their project to set 50 weeks for stage A. We will come back to it later. 50 weeks for stage A, and then the remaining 18 weeks for stage E. Again, we will come back to that later. The BT decision invite as well the TC that have work items that are under development, so meaning that the new work item has been approved before October 1st, so under development but not yet submitted to inquiry or formal vote, to come to us, to my team, to request a CCMC quality check, because it can help you improve the quality of your draft and of your annexes. But again, we will come back to that during the presentation. So as we said, the innovative process applies to homegrown harmonized standards that are submitted to the EC's consultant assessment. We say EC consultant assessment and not HAS assessment, because this process applies as well to eco-design work items that are under that are assessed by VHK consultant and not HAS consultant. So homegrown new work items as of April 1, and for homegrown harmonized standards that are not intended to be submitted to consultants, the innovative process does not apply. Why? Why did we want to change the process? So, as you know, it's quite challenging to get a compliant assessment still today. During the previous HAS contract, so as you know, we had a HAS contract that ran from 2018 until 2021, kind of, and since October 2022, we are under the new HAS contract. So under the previous HAS contract, we had an average of around 30% of compliant assessment at all stages. Of course, for the last stages, formal vote and pub back then, the compliance ratio was a bit higher, but overall, we had around 30% of compliant assessments. Since January 2023, under the new contract, we have an average of 16% of compliant assessment, so even worse. By the way, those figures are from June, but I checked the latest report we have, the figures from November, and we are still around 16 to 18% of compliant assessments. So because of that, we think that we need to change things to improve. Another element to take into account, this table is coming from EY, where they made an analysis of the main reasons for lack of compliance. The figures here are from statistics from August 2022, meaning the very beginning of the new HAS contract, and it was run until May 2023, but same thing, I checked the latest figures, and we are more or less in the same ballpark. And here we can identify the main reasons leading to a lack of compliance. And we see that we have issues with undated normative references here and here. If we add those two, we have 42% linked to issues with normative references. Issues with the technical content as well. Technical content not in line with the legal requirement. And at the bottom here, we have two blocks of issues related to the Annex Z. So the Annex Z, again, is the annex that links the clause of your standard with the essential requirement of the directive. So issues with the compliance, today 16% of compliant assessment, and the main reason for lack of compliance are related to issues with the normative references, the Annex Z, and technical content of the standard. So the objective of the innovative process is to improve the timely delivery of compliant harmonized standard. But how could we achieve that? By shifting the focus at the beginning of the development process. We realized that a lot of work items receive a lack of compliant assessment at formal vote because the assessment the assessment initiative has started quite late in the development phase. And therefore, quite some projects, especially projects developed at parallel are blocked at formal votes because of issues with the assessment that are difficult to address. If we start earlier in the development process to think about the harmonization, if we make the standard assessed by the health consultant earlier, we believe that we will successfully be able to address all the comments from the health consultant. As well, another important element is the new CCMC quality check. So the last, one of the last slides I showed about the main reason for lack of compliance, as you saw, are related to issues with normative references and the Annex Z. The CCMC quality check is there to help you identify early in the beginning, in the development process of your draft harmonized standard, elements that could eventually potentially lead to a lack of compliant assessment. So the combination of the mature draft, so shifting the focus on harmonized elements early in the development process, together with the new CCMC quality check, we hope that those two main elements will help improve the timely delivery of compliant harmonized standards. And again, this process applies only to harmonized standards that are submitted to EC's consultant assessment, homegrown harmonized standard. Yes, Raja.
So the mature draft, is that the equivalent of the first working draft where you request the assessment or is it inquiry draft?
It's a very good point. The mature draft is an inquiry draft. We will come back to that later, but the idea is to have a draft that is mature enough for us to be able to help you improve it. But we will come back to that. I have another slide covering the definition of the mature draft. So now we are going to go through what changes for this process to be implemented. So, as I just said before, the innovative process is based on the two main pillars. So the mature draft concept, Raj, it's the draft that is ready for inquiry, almost ready for inquiry. And there it's up to the work group convener or the TC secretary to define, to identify if the draft is mature enough, between brackets, to be submitted to the process. The mature draft assessment is mandatory. As you know, in the previous process, the actual process, there's the first working draft assessment that is optional, highly recommended, but optional. And now this mature draft assessment is mandatory. So the optional first working draft, therefore, is not possible anymore, but the first working draft circulation is still possible.
Yeah. A question about the mature draft concept. It's good that this happened, but it's even better when during the process is guidance where you go wrong. Because if I see in the last years, people work very hard sometimes understand it and they put in information and then later on the pop up somebody what we didn't know and then you need to change anything from the start. Why not earlier? Because then you can directly have a discussion about the subject. Why in the end?
So yeah, it's a good point as well. So the mature draft is checked. It goes through the quality check before it is sent for the very first HAS assessment.
My question was, why not earlier? If you do it before, then maybe, let's say, okay, you work 2 years on a standard, then 5 minutes before you send it in, you're going to check. Why not the first 2 months or 4 months or 5 months or 6 months? It makes no sense to first do a lot of work for people and then they'd say, hey, you make it wrong, bye.
But the novelty is exactly this one, that a full assessment takes place well before the inquiry, which today is not the case. Huh? There are very few cases of first working draft assessment, and still first working draft is still a not mature document. Here, the main purpose of this new process is let's have the eyes of CCMC to spot any internal regulation part 3 aspects, including normative reference improvements, plus let's have a full assessment on a standard that is deemed to be ready for inquiry. Let's give the time to a technical committee to address the comments of CCMC, the comments of the assessment before the inquiry, and then we go to inquiry. So it's exactly, we are, if you compare with the current way of working, we are triggering the technical committee experts to think, to develop a document and receive input from CCMC. And also, I would say the consultant, take it as an input. So these such early assessment, take it as an input, because we cannot help you, CCMC cannot help you to improve Annex Z, but the consultant can. And you receive this before inquiry. And at inquiry, you will have a second assessment. If this failed, you will have a second assessment, but maybe we should not anticipate your slides. So we understand your points. Let's see the full process together, and then maybe we can comment together at the end.
Yeah, it's a little bit the same question, because my understanding so far was that it was a will to start the process at steady stage of ISC, because here somehow at a certain time the CDV in ISC for parallel vote, for example, is a basis for the inquiry. So then when we are at CDV stage, any technical change or anything like that could create a big problem. Whereas when we are at CD stage, there is still kind of easier, I would say, to adjust. Huh?
So thanks for your comment. There are two things here. You talk about Senelec, CD, IEC. It's a different process. We are still busy working on the parallel process for harmonized standard developed in parallel. And so here we focus only on homegrown, Sen and Senelec only, not in parallel. And for parallel work, by the way, yes, we will start at CD. We will have a CD assessment. Now, for the mature draft, we consider that it's up to the work group convener or the TC secretary actually to decide if the draft is mature enough. You can probably send us a draft that is not fully mature, but still proceed. And by having the check done at CCMC on the mature draft, and as well having a HAS assessment before being sent to inquiry, then you have all the flexibility after the two first checks. So quality check plus the mature draft assessment before the inquiry, you have the flexibility to completely change, if needed, your draft before it is circulated for the inquiry.
Yeah, so this process is not yet implemented. I mean, if, for example, I have a draft which is ready for circulating as a CD, I can send you even now. Yes. Even if in parallel vote, it's not an homegrown standard.
Thank you. So yes, for parallel work, it's a bit, we are still working on it, but please send us your CD. We can do a quality check on it, please. Yes, thank you. So
see the quality check as an additional service, exceptional additional service. It doesn't follow the innovative process for homegrown. It is not yet following the new process for parallel that we have still to put in place. We are very close. We have already an agreement with IC. Now we are in the technicalities. We are in the IT compatibility of IT systems.
So yeah, the two main pillars. So we are talking about the mature draft assessment and as well the CCMC quality check, where the goal is to really help the TCs identify elements that could lead to a lack of compliance assessment. Again, I'm coming back to the main reasons for lack of compliance, the table I showed from EY, and the new CCMC quality check. The CCMC quality check will mostly use the common checklist as a support document. I will come back to the common checklist as well later. It's a new checklist that replaces the harmonized standard checklist that was, as you know, already mandatory for homegrown harmonized standards. This one is a big one. So this is the complete timeline of a development of a harmonized standard under the innovative process. We will go back to the different steps more in detail in coming slides, but I want to have a global view already. So stage A here, it's under the flex process. So you define the stage A. As we saw in the BT decision, BT recommends you to set 50 weeks for stage A, and then 18 weeks for stage E. But again, we will come back to that. And you know as well that if you don't use the 50 weeks within stage A, though the remaining time from stage A will be shifted to stage E. But again, we will come back to that. So stage A, your mature draft is ready. You come to us, to CCMC. Here, K is the CCMC quality check. So you provide to us the draft standard, the European elements, Annex Z, A, ZZ, depending on if you're from CEN or CENELEC, the common checklist filled in. We perform the quality check within 3 weeks. So we have 3 weeks, 15 days to perform the quality check. Once the quality check ready, we send you the outcome. And here you have 3 weeks to address the comments from the quality check. The comments that are mandatorily to be addressed are comments related to issues with IR3 or normative references. I will say something here as well. We recommend you that when you submit your draft and elements for the CCMC quality check, within the work group, you should probably foresee already a work group meeting to discuss the outcome of the quality check and how to address the comments. So 3 weeks of quality check, the draft is sent back to the TC for them to address the comments from the quality check. The draft is sent back to CCMC for the mature draft assessment, the very first mandatory assessment. If the box here is surrounded, I don't see the cursor anymore. Yeah. If it's bold, it means it's mandatory. So mature draft assessment becomes mandatory for new work items under the innovative process. The assessment normally is done in 5 weeks. When normally, I know some of you are smiling. When the assessment report is available, it is shared with the secretary. The secretary receives a notification, an email notification that contains the assessment report. Then the TC has 3 weeks again to consider the comments from the HAS consultant and to address them. And then once ready, the documents for the inquiry, so B here is the inquiry, are sent to CCMC, this time through the submission interface for the inquiry ballot to start. And then here for the part here, this is the inquiry confirmatory assessment. If there's a lack of compliance at mature draft, let's be honest, 99% of the time it will be the case, then there's the possibility to have, we call it inquiry confirmatory assessment. It means that it's an assessment to kind of confirm that you have addressed the comments from the HAS consultants. And then it's a similar process for the formal vote stage, but at the formal vote here, we have the possibility to have an LCA, so the last confirmatory assessment, in case of lack of compliance at formal vote, but we will come back to that later in the process. So this is, again, the complete overview of the innovative process. And now we will go a bit more into the details. Right, yeah.
quite unlikely, but if the mature draft assessment is positive, can you still request a second assessment at inquiry, or is that skipped?
So if you have a compliant assessment at mature draft, you don't have to request another assessment at inquiry. You could. I think, yeah.
Just speaking from experiences, even when the same consultant is involved from one stage to the other, when there's been very minor changes, we get new comments which were not raised on the previous draft.
Yeah, so
which is becoming a major issue.
So if I may, if you have a compliant assessment, but if you change your draft, yes, submit it for another assessment. I think it's the safest way to avoid any surprise at the end. Yeah. So this is what I was explaining about the different timing. So the quality check, 3 weeks. The time for you to revise the comments, 4 weeks. Then we submit the draft to the HAS assessment. The HAS assessment normally has 5 weeks to deliver the assessment report. And then you have, sorry, I said 3 weeks, but it's 5 weeks. Sorry. 5 weeks for you to consider the comments from the HAS consultant and revise the draft before it is submitted for the inquiry. And the same steps applies for the pre-formal vote, so for the formal vote stage. And there, if there's a lack of compliance at formal vote, there's a possibility to go for the LCA, that is the last confirmatory assessment. It's kind of the new name for the previous pub assessment. But we had to change the name because the commission didn't want us to use pub assessment. Yeah, had a question? So if I go back here, in total, we have 17 weeks for the first part, counting everything, and then 25 weeks if we need to go to the LCA.
So the LCA draft assessment, that's after the final vote has been issued, or is it during?
It's a very good point. As you can see here, all the assessments are done before the formal vote ballot. And this is kind of a novelty as well, because this will allow you to address all the comments, even if they are technical, before the draft is submitted for formal vote. Because it's one of the issues today. The draft is sent for formal vote, sent for assessment at the same time. You receive comments from the HAS consultant, sometimes technical comments, and the project is blocked because, as you know, once the document is submitted for formal vote, there's no technical changes possible. So thanks with this new process, since we have all the assessments done before the formal vote, you should be able to address technical comments before the draft is submitted to formal vote.
Just to give you an idea, at the Senelec Technical Board, we have a standing item on projects blocked at formal vote or after formal vote. So here, the decision of the technical boards is issues with compliance should not be solved at the end of the process, but should be discussed earlier. So that's why this new process has been designed.
Thanks, Alberto. And so, yeah, I emphasize, sorry, the idea of shifting the focus and the efforts at the beginning of a development process and not waiting the end to be blocked and to try to find a solution where sometimes it's not possible to find a solution to address the comments.
I come back on the question earlier, and believe me, I think it's a good step forward, but I'm not convinced that we are still there. The problem is that sometimes you take some new factors or things like that, what you need to do in your standard, what is maybe not allowed in the end. Then you need to rewrite part of your standard, and there should be more check and balances also in between. And even small things where something new that you can send to the HAS consultant and say, okay, we want to take this in, we have worked it out, it's a concept, it's small, is it okay with you? instead of waiting till the end, because if it is come to the end, it's a question, is it okay or not? And it's not okay, then you have done really a lot of work, but you need to do renew. And that is, maybe we can do it better than even we do it now. That is my point.
I see your point, but then we enter another problem is the co-drafting. It's forbidden for the HAS consultant to co-draft a standard. And in this case, what you say is that it's you do something, you ask the HAS consultant if it's okay. He cannot do that. They can't do that. No, they can't. No, the commission is against that. They cannot co-draft. They can tell you if what you wrote is not compliant with the essential requirements of the directive, but they cannot tell you, yeah, what you did is okay, or it's kind of a co-drafting, you see. There's a fine line between co-drafting and assessing, but what you're suggesting, it's not possible. It means the HAS consultant will have to be involved almost within the working group, and check the drafts regularly to see if it's on the right track. It's not possible. It's not possible to do that. A work item, a project can be assessed a maximum of 4 times. We can have a maximum of 4 assessments for a project. So yeah. And today, with the process that we are implementing now.
So your progress is 16%. Of all the people working, you have 16%. You get on citation. 16%. And now you ask people to do a lot of work. And of course, there's a good direction because you do a lot of extra work. And then when something new come up, what people don't know 100% sure, this can be yes or no. There's no possibility to ask the HAS consultant if they agree or not.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's hope that this will be more than 60% next time, and don't 100% be sure of that question.
So normally, yes, they are supposed to, when they send an assessment report, they have to explain why they give a lack of compliance. I will show you an example of the table of comments where you have they are checking several elements in the common checklist. And if an element, let's say you have a normative reference that is not dated, an easy one, they will check the box undated normative reference, and voilà, it's easy for you to fix. You can have more difficult things to fix. For example, a technical requirement that is not in line with the legal requirement of the directive, but normally the HAS consultant has to explain. And if you don't understand his comments, if you have a doubt, you still have the possibility to request a meeting with the HAS consultant following an assessment report, so that you clarify the comments received. Yes. 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 It's not co-drafting, but when they deliver an assessment report, you should ask for a meeting with the HAS consultant to clarify the comments received. Yes, to make sure that when you address his comments, when you update your draft, you go in the right direction. He will not be able to tell you, yeah, you can do that. No, but at least he can clarify the comments that he gave or she gave.
Can I ask, I know working groups have a lot of questions when they start drafting a harmonized standard, like how should we set up which paragraphs are needed, which other standards can we refer to that are not published yet? Questions like that, where can we go to?
It's a good point. So we have in Senelec different guidance documents, internal regulations part 3, the very first one to use, obviously. On the both pages, they are under update. We are busy updating them for all the pages related to harmonized standards. We are busy updating them, but it's a good page for guidance. As well, the common checklist. The new common checklist is a good guidance document because it's the same document that the HAS consultants use for their assessment. So by looking at the different elements of the common checklist, it should help you check yourself if your draft is in line with the regulation, with the directives.
Well, I've looked at that checklist, but it doesn't give you guidance on how to structure your standard, for example. Well,
IR3.
yeah, just a little bit.
Internal
Like-
regulations part 3. And by the way, we have
but specifically the harmonized the relationship with the directives that's not clear.
Yeah, I will give you offline some trainings we have about, so guidance trainings about IR3. We have specific guidance as well for the use of normative references. You said normative references. We have a guidance for using normative references in harmonized standards. And then we have as well content for Annex Z. It's horizontal, generic, so it's not sector specific, but it can be a good start.
No, maybe just add a slide at the end with all these hyperlinks.
I have one that I will probably.
Yes, so they have everything, and you can refer to the commission desk officer during the process of standards development for any question you may have. So it's not the consultant that should be, let's say, integrated in the discussion, but the commission officer is, in theory, in principle, there to help you if you have some questions regarding the standards that you are developing. And another element, you can see that the circulation of the first working draft is still there. So this is unchanged. It's just that there is no longer an assessment is foreseen, but in any case, the reality was that we had very few cases. So basically, the possibility was not there, it was not used. So now we bring forward the assessment before the inquiry, well before the inquiry, to have a final document for inquiry, so to go to the B editing by CCMC and then inquiry, that already has been improved following the quality check and the first assessment of the consultant.
Is there any chance that the as consultant process improve in terms of length, because almost all the assessment are done within more than the 5 weeks? So is there something to improve?
Definitely, yes, definitely. So normally they have 35 days, 5 weeks to deliver the assessment report, and today the average is above 100 days. So definitely they can improve, and we are pushing for it. So I'm in charge of having coordination meetings with Ernst & Young and the Commission, and it's one of the topics I raise every time. Yeah, they have to improve. And by the way, we have what we call a structured dialogue. So it's a high-level discussions between SEN and SENELEC and the European Commission, and this item is on the agenda. This is, yeah, if they deliver in 5 weeks, but it's true. I'm not gonna lie. Today they rarely deliver in 5 weeks, but we are pushing them really hard to improve. Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
I want to ask you if there are some key track points for understanding how assessments are done. So, because from the political point of view, we have to write something that's starting from an index for a draft, making a consensus between all the experts, and the index is the first part, then jumping into the text, and then arrive at the end that is mature enough, and then have a challenge with the assessment to verify that everything is okay. But my point of view is how to understand that I'm making in the correct way if I'm not able to understand how the assessment will be done.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Thank you. And that's where the common checklist is there to help you. So when you deliver your element to CCMC for the quality check and then for the assessment request, you must send us as well the common checklist filled in. It means that you will use the common checklist to check that your draft is in line with the regulation. So yourself, you will do a self-assessment using the common checklist. I have some slides about it later. Using this common checklist, you will be able to check, for example, there's a check on the forward. You will check that the forward is drafted as is supposed to be drafted. You will check that you have a clause 2. You will check that within the clause 2, your normative references, if you have normative references, are dated, active, and published. So you will go through different checks, and this this common checklist will help you check if your draft seems to be okay for the first assessment. So let's see now how, from a practical point of view, we implement this new process. And let's see first the impact on the planning flex process. I guess you went yesterday through a presentation about the flex. And so as we saw at the beginning, BT recommends you to go by default to 50 weeks for stage A, and then you would remain with 18 weeks for stage E. So this is for Sen. Senelec, it's the same thing. The form is different, but it's the same thing. So we recommend to set 50 weeks for stage A, and then since you know the complete development time is 68 weeks, if you take 50 for stage A, then you end up with 18 for stage E. And this is for joint thesis in Sen and Senelec, same principle. So this is a close look at the first steps with, again, the different timings. So as I was saying earlier, it's recommended when you submit your elements for the quality check to already plan work group meetings ahead, so that when the quality check outcome is delivered and the assessment report delivered, you have already a meeting planned to discuss the comments. So 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 5 weeks. If, as I was saying earlier about the flex, if you don't use all the time that you foresaw for A, this time will be shifted to E. If you still use the 50 weeks, and in case of lack of compliance on the confirmatory inquiry assessment, then we recommend you to request a 9 months tolerance so that you have enough time on the formal vote stage for your development. Yeah. So it's exactly what I was saying for the review of planning. So yeah, the time not used in stage A moved in stage B. So I didn't talk about the one change option, but you know that the one change option allows you to change the time originally foreseen, but it does not extend the time. But so if you receive a lack of compliance for the inquiry confirmatory assessment, it is recommended to ask for a tolerance. For Sen, you need a BT decision, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And for Senelec, it's only an email from the TC officer to CCMC, and you will have the 9 months tolerance granted by default. Yeah. The new common checklist. So a bit of history, you know that the checklist for harmonized standard is mandatory since 2021. Why this checklist was created? It because within Senelec BT Working Group 12, it was they saw that there was an increase of lack of compliant outcome at formal vote, and the main reasons for lack of compliance were related to issues with internal regulations part 3, a bit similar as what we have today. And so it was decided to create the checklist for harmonized standards to help technical bodies in drafting harmonized standards and to increase the assessment compliance ratio. This checklist became mandatory as of October 2021, and it was a horizontal checklist. So it means that for some sector specific, we can have some sector specific checklists, for example, construction. The checklist for harmonized standard had to be completed and dispatched to CCMC for all stages and assessments. So the checklist was mandatory for homegrown and highly recommended, strongly recommended for work under parallel development, because there again, it can really help identify critical elements that could potentially lead to a lack of compliant assessments. This is the old checklist where you see you have, for example, the European forward. You have to check if your forward is okay, the scope, if the scope has been drafted correctly, if there's no requirement in the scope, for example, and so on and so on. We have, sorry, we have now moved to the new ESO's EC common checklist. This common checklist is an outcome as well of the ESO's EC task force, where the innovative process has been thought and drafted. And same here, the goal is to help the technical committees identify the critical elements in the draft that could lead to a lack of compliant assessment. But now the big advantage is that the same document is used by the TCs when drafting the standards and the HAS consultant for their check and their assessment report. So today, when you receive an assessment report, the HAS consultant normally shall use the new common checklist. So when you will assess your draft with the checklist, the HAS consultant will use the same template. It will be not exactly the same document, but the same template will be used for the HAS consultant to assess the conformity of your document against the directive. This new checklist is mandatory as of October 1st, same as the innovative process. And the same thing, it's mandatory for homegrown harmonized standards and strongly, highly recommended for work, for parallel work, for standard under parallel development. And you can find the links to the common checklist on the Senelec bus and the Sen bus, where the checklist is available there. Any question about the checklist? Sorry. Yeah.
Is there a plan to make a guide for this checklist to help to, because in some cases, the different points are not so clear?
Yeah, I agree. For some elements in the checklist, it can leave a bit room for interpretation. It's difficult for us to have a complete guide because there are elements in the checklist that we don't check that are technical, like the link between the technical element of a standard and the legislation. And it's difficult for us to check because we are not technical experts. You are the experts. And at the same time, we are not legal experts. It's really at the edge of what we can do. So we can help you with things related to normative references, for example, to eventually the granularity of an Annex Z, but we cannot help you with all the elements of the checklist. So this is how kind of the checklist should be used for Sen. So the work group draft the standard. In Sen, the work group qualifies support, checks that the draft standard fulfills the requirements to be cited and ensures that the checklist is filled out. Checks that the draft fulfills the requirement. It means uses the checklist to check if all the elements are covered and are okay with the requirements. Then the work group submits the draft, the checklist filled in, as well as all the supporting elements if you are about to request an assessment at inquiry, for example. You have to make sure that the comments from the previous assessments are addressed or at least replied to. Then those elements are sent to the TC secretary, who submits everything to CCMC for the quality check and or the assessment request. If all the elements are submitted, the in-check goes on it's okay. If the checklist is not submitted, then we will reject the submission and we will ask you to come back to us with all the needed elements. And by the way, about the timing, we said that, for example, for the quality check, we are supposed to give you the outcome after 3 weeks. The clock starts when the in-check is positive. So it's 3 weeks as of when we have all the documents. If we miss a document, the submission will be rejected and the counter will not start. It will start only when we have all the elements. It's the same process for Senelec, except that there's no workgroup qualified support, but it's the same principle. Now, the quality check. It's one of the main novelty of the innovative process, the other main pillar. So, as we were saying, the goal of the quality check is there to help you identify early in the draft elements that could lead to eventually a lack of compliance. The quality check, as we saw in the complete timeline of the development, will be done at 2 stages. So on the mature draft, the very first stage, the very beginning, and as well on the pre-formal vote draft. As said, the quality check will be done based on the new common checklist. It will be really the base of the quality check. And again, this new common checklist is the same document that the HAS consultant will use for his or her assessment. But for the quality check, as again, we are not technical experts, we will focus only on criteria linked to IR3, normative references, and annexes Z and ZA, and there we will not be able to cover everything, but we will be able to cover some elements, and I think we will be able to help you already probably highlight some potential issues there. Yes.
Just to be clear, the reference ZZ there is for SEN and not ZZ, which is in Senelec.
So yeah, good point. So Annex ZA, it's mostly for SEN, where you have the links between the essential requirements and the clause of your directive, or the table ZA2, where you could have the NDT normative references, and the Annex ZA for Senelec, where it's only for parallel work, international standard, the link between the international normative reference and the EN IEC reference. And the Annex ZZ for Senelec is the same as the Annex ZD for Sen, where it's the links between the essential requirements, exactly, and the clause of your standard. So yeah, it's what I was saying. What we check during the quality check, so the normative references, the annex, we check the forward, the scope, the terminology, the neutrality principle. We check if there's any ambiguous sentences, ambiguous requirements, and if there's personal data within the draft. So for the normative reference, as we saw in the slide with the main reason for lack of compliance, it's still today one of the main reasons for lack of compliance. So we have on the podium, the top 3 are related to issues with normative reference, issues with Annex Z, and technical content. And so if we are able to fix only the normative reference, I think we will make quite some significant progress. So the normative reference, as a reminder, they should be dated, active, and published, and not subject to formal objection. If your normative reference is used in the Annex Z, it shall be used in a clause that gives presumption of conformity, and it should follow the rules of the guidance on normative reference on top of IR3. So you have rules in the SEN and Senelec internal regulations part 3. You have rules for normative references that applies to all standards, but for harmonized standards, you have another layer of rules that are listed in the guidance on normative references, and there you have more requirements to deal with a legal certainty. For example, the dated normative references in a non-harmonized standard, you can use undated normative references, but in a harmonized standards, the Commission doesn't want to have undated normative references because of legal certainty.
A question for actively published and not subject to formal objection. If there is some standards that are on revision, maybe after 5 years, and they are did not pass the new assessment, I have possibility to refer to an old standard, the previous one, or I can't use it.
So yeah, your question is if there's a yeah.
For example, I have an example in my experience that now we have to refer to a standard that was published in 2017, and now it is on revision, but the revision did not overcome the assessment.
Yeah.
So one question in the group was, okay, we can refer because this part is not under assessment to the previous edition.
Is it the same series or it's a totally different standard?
We are talking about the length standards, and we have to refer to this standard for writing hydrogen source of for hydrogen.
No, so I would recommend you not to use it as a normative
not
reference.
possible.
No. It has to be active and published. There's one case where you could use a draft standard as a normative reference. It's when you develop a series of standards, part 1, 2, 3, 4 together. They are all drafted at the same time. And if they refer to each other, in that case, you can use the draft as a normative reference. And in that case, you will receive a conditional compliance. It means the compliance could be conditional, meaning that to be compliant at the end of the development, all the normative references should be published and available. That's the only case.
And so the last is if the assessments of that standard that have to refer is stopped and stuck, I can go at the end of my process.
But if the previous reference, the one that is under revision, if it's still active,
yeah, the old one
yeah.
of 2017 is active, but
so,
the new one, the revision that is small part is under assessments and this stopped.
Yeah,
I had to write it on my part. So,
but we can discuss for some specific cases like that. But in general, you should not use a draft standard as a normative reference because it will not fly. Or if you during the development, if you know that during the development of your standard, the normative reference is still at a draft stage, but you know that by the time you finish yours, the normative reference you use will be published. Why not?
Yeah,
but when you reach the end,
but I bet that it will arrive at the end
yeah.
with my time. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, Annex Z, same thing. We saw that it has a big impact on the compliance outcome. And on our side, we check during the quality check that the correct template has been used. As you know, there is a different Annex Z depending on the legislation you're targeting. So if your work item is linked to several directives, EMCD, LVD, you need to have one Annex Z per directive. And yeah, we check that it covers that the clauses that are listed in the Annex Z are only drafted as requirements. And we check some best practices in the Annex Z. We check forwards. So this is the elements. Yeah, sorry.
Machinery directive is evolving into the machinery regulation. So we're going to have to put in 2 annexes for those. When do we start adding in the annex for the machinery regulation?
It's a very good point. I would invite you to contact Nuno Pargana or Joanna. They are the specialists in the machinery directive regulation, and they will be able to help you. I know that indeed we will have 2 annexes, one for the current directive and then one for the coming regulation. But for the timing on and the really specific question, I really invite you to contact Joanna and Nuno. They are the specialists and they will be very happy to help you. Thank you. But it's a very good question. Yeah, we check as well that the draft, the clauses supporting the essential requirements, the requirements are clear, and we check that there's no ambiguous sentences. For example, the voltage shall not exceed a too high value. What value? So this is the type of things we try to detect. Voilà. So we went through the tools that will help us implement this new process. So the two main pillars start early in the development phase, the CCMC quality check that we just saw, the common checklist that will help you do a self-assessment of your draft and help us do the CCMC quality check. And now we are going into the steps in detail. So this will be a detailed explanation of the timeline we saw a few minutes ago. And now we will really dive into the details of it. So as I was saying earlier, we still have, as within the previous HAS contract, maximum of 4 assessments possible per work item. The mature draft that is now mandatory, the inquiry confirmatory that is optional in case only if a lack of compliant assessment at mature draft, or if there are changes in your draft, please do it. The pre-formal vote assessment that is mandatory if you don't skip formal vote, of course. And then the last confirmatory assessment that we hope will become exceptional with all the new measures in place, starting early, the quality check and so on. We really hope that the LCA will be more and more exceptional. So we start when the mature draft is ready and when you have self-assessed your draft with the common checklist, you should send all these elements together with all the supporting documents, all the annexes and so on, for the quality check. And as I was saying earlier, 2-steps approach. Unfortunately, the IT tools are not ready yet. So for now, we are going to work through emails. It's not super convenient, but for now, that's the only way. And we hope that we will have the IT tools ready as soon as possible, but we will come back to you when ready. So for now, all your elements, draft, annexes, filled in common checklist, submitted to HSC. So it's the inbox of my team. And then we will either do the quality check ourselves, Mauro and Nanda, or we will push it to a sectorial project manager, probably the sectorial project manager of your TC, who would perform the quality check.
I have a question. Before you suggest us to move some week to the TS stage in order to have much time, but considering, for example, that a working group have to write a new standard, so start with a blank page and have to write all. Considering that the convener and other experts have another work respecting the standardization work, so maybe 25 weeks, half of the TA stage cannot be enough in order to have a mature draft. Okay. Now I have the question. Usually in the new work item proposal, I talk regarding my technical committee, so that in the new work item proposal, the date of the start of the work usually is always written BT approval. So usually BT approval, now I saw that will be improved and accelerated this time, but since now we have to wait 5 or 4 months after the committee approval. it's possible, and this is the question, is it possible if for the drafting of the standard and the publication of the standard, there isn't stringent requirement of time? Is it possible to insert as a start date, for example, a date after 7 or 9 months after the proposal of the new work item proposal? Maybe I can, for example, we start with the new work item proposal. The new work item proposal start to go to the various national committee in order to receive the vote. Okay, but in the new work item proposal, for example, is written the date of 1 year after for the start. Then after will be the technical committee. The technical committee give the decision. After the decision start the call for expert and convener, but we gain time. Otherwise, we have to use the one change option, the 9 months, and all. Thank you.
Yes. So, if you said that you would like to plan the starting date some weeks, few weeks after the theoretical BT approval, because Senelec still has to undergo the BT approval, I would agree, but saying that you fix it 8 months later is a real lot. Then you should work, you should create a preliminary work item rather. So to create a preliminary work item, start working the preliminary work item, and then activate the preliminary work item, becomes basically 1099. And this would be a better way to manage a project. Maybe on the flexible process. So yes, go to the time frame. No, but maybe also, yeah, exactly. Yeah, this one. So the BT recommended in general for let's say a main standard 50 weeks for stage A. So it's the first part in blue, where basically the 50 weeks are composed of 33 weeks of time for the TC to work on the draft, plus the 17 weeks of ping pong between CCMC quality check and the assessment. Of course, provided that the 5 weeks are respected by the consultant, which is not the case. There was a disruption, as you will know, in the assessments. Now there is a backlog, and I guess, Frederick, the backlog has been cleared by, or is on. It's ongoing. So are they're improving? So time frame, even if for us too slowly, is improving. So we trust that we hope this can be let's say to come back to the 5 weeks, which before the disruption was respected. I think that they stick to the 35 days. So in order also to include these possible delay, the technical boards recommend to take 50 weeks. So you can work without any, I would say, time pressure. Of course, you can also go for the maximum. The maximum is 62 weeks, because you should always leave 6 weeks for the second part. So for the stage E, should be 6 weeks. So you can take 62 and leave 6. Then if you, at the end of quality check, you prove the draft. First assessment, you prove the draft. You're able to deliver before the 62 weeks. You gain all the weeks, all the time that you have saved will be transferred to the second part, because the editing, so the part B will start earlier, the translation will start earlier, the inquiry will start earlier. What will not start earlier is 4599, so dispatch of the for formal vote. So basically, since this part will be brought forward, the part stage G becomes wider. So you find that time there. Now, it's very likely that you will have to take a tolerance. The recommendation in the slides is take a tolerance already, maybe if you can go on the cursor, when in the confirmatory. No, if you remain on that timeline, just, yes, exactly, yeah. So when you go to the confirmatory inquiry assessment, so the second assessment, if the first failed, and we believe this will fail in 90% of the cases. So the first mature draft assessment, we believe it fails at 99% because it is built exactly to get the input from the consultant. Because when you get a non-compliant assessment at the beginning of the process, you understand where to improve. When you get it at the end of the process, it's a problem. So here is a possible help to improve the standard and the annexes. Today, we have the non-compliance is at the end of the process, so it's a problem. And we leave the problem, you leave as TBOs the problem, documents are stuck. And of course, all our theory, flexible process, deadlines, everything is messed up. There is a low reduction in the production of standards because they are stuck at the end. So when you are at the inquiry confirmatory assessment, so there, if you go on the cursor and move it, and if this is still negative, which is what we expect, but we think that the compliance rate could go up at least 35–40%, then ask for a 9 months tolerance to work under stage E without time pressure. If you plan that, of course, you can, for the revision of standard, if you plan that you need a few time under stage A, you think 10 weeks is enough, always consider. The ping pong could last 17 weeks. We can have still delay in the process, so count 17–20 weeks more, and then you can plan accordingly with a flex concept.
Yes, right, sorry.
Yeah, so the delivery of the annexes, if the annexes are already incorporated in the draft, I assume you don't need to provide them separately, right? Okay, and another question, at the moment, we also send the risk assessment based on, for at least for LVD, the guide. Does that need to be still done and sent? Okay.
Yes, so all the supporting documents, it's not that important for the quality check itself, but please send them so that we have everything ready, and we would be ready for the assessment requests later on. So all the elements sent by email to the HSC team for the quality check performed in 15 working days, and once the quality check ready, we share the outcome of the quality check by email again with the technical body officer. The technical body officer and the TC, the work group, have 4 weeks to address the comments, and we remind you that all the comments related to issues with internal regulations part 3, the annexed and normative references, shall be addressed. And then if for whatever reason there are comments that are not possible or you don't want to address, you should justify it in the quality check comments and explain why it's not addressed. It can be because you use a normative reference for parts that you don't need to date. And so yeah, if you have a justification, it shall be written in the quality check document. That is the outcome of the on the checklist document. Sorry, I'm confusing now. So we provide the quality check filled in for the outcome of the checklist filled in, and then you have to comment when there's a comment there that you don't take into account. When we receive all the elements updated after the 4 weeks. Same thing, those elements have to be delivered by email to mail HSC. So the updated draft and annexes, together with the filled-in checklist, the risk assessment, for example, for LVD, then we request the assessment to the contractor. So for the HAS assessment for LVD, for example, it's Ernst & Young. Voilà, we request the assessment. So when the assessment report is delivered, hopefully in 35 days, the TC secretary will receive an email notification that includes the assessment report within the notification. If the mature draft assessment is compliant, then the technical body officer should deliver the draft for inquiry through the submission interface this time to start the inquiry process. If the mature draft is lack of compliance, you can request a meeting with the HAS consultant to clarify the comments. I recommend you doing it because especially for the very first assessment where you might receive quite some comments, I think it's useful and beneficial for you to have an exchange with the HAS consultant to make sure that you fully understand all the comments and you're able to address them. And for that, by the way, you know that you have to use the EY meeting request tool. I probably have a link to it somewhere in the presentation. So address comments from the HAS consultant, and then same thing here, through the submission interface, you should provide all the elements, the updated draft, the comment checklist, table of comments, and all the supporting documents. And same thing here, if there's a document missing, for example, the comment checklist, the filled-in comment checklist is missing, the submission will be rejected. And so when we launch the translation, then the inquiry confirmatory assessment will be requested. That's the part that was dashed in the B area in the timeline. In the C area, sorry, yeah, that's this one. So at the end, same thing. The assessment report will be delivered by email. And in case of lack of compliance at inquiry confirmatory assessment, the inquiry ballot will not be delayed. So the process will proceed.
My question is, we've got the machinery directive and we're going to be migrating to the machinery regulation. When should we be adding in the checklist for the machinery regulation, which I know is going to be coming through? The annex, yes, the annex. Z.
Good afternoon. My name is Joanna Frankowska. I'm a project manager for machinery here in Sensenelec. So the question is when to add the Annex Z for machinery. So you can do it already now in the draft standard. The important thing to take into account is that now we need to start developing the standards in support of the machine regulation. But at this moment, we cannot publish them yet. We will be able to do it once the standardization request for machine regulation will be finalized, which is expected to take place mid-24. Normally, this is what the Commission and us would like to achieve. But here, because we would like to have this legal basis, in place so that we can publish the standards for machine regulation. But here, just a little warning from my side. Sometimes it happens that the finalization of the standardization request take place longer than initially foreseen. We have, for example, elections to the European Parliament. But based on this, what has been planned with the Commission, we have CCMC together with the chair of the machinery sector, we have circulated quite detailed indication and guidance in which standards this Annex Z for machinery could be already included. And I hope that you have received it. If not, I will be happy to resend it to you, because there are different situations. Because if the standard is already under finalization, there is no, it's not possible to include Annex Z now because of the reason I said, we don't have standards requests in place, but it is also quite easy for these standards, new standards, to add such an annex later, because we have a fast track process in place in order to add Annex Z. But this would rather work only for the standards that have been published recently.
So I will proceed with the process. So there's a possibility to skip formal votes if you want to, but if the following conditions are fulfilled, so obviously the inquiry ballot has to be positive. One of the previous assessments shall have received a conditional compliance or a compliant assessment. Conditional compliance, again, this is related to the use of draft normative reference. But again, here the condition is that if you skip the formal vote and you still have normative reference that are draft, you have to make sure that by the time your work item is published, the normative reference used is published and available as well. Otherwise, it will not be possible to offer it for citation, or it will be rejected from citation. Another condition is like, of course, following the inquiry, there are no technical changes needed or made. And then the TC, the technical body, can decide by simple majority to skip the formal vote and proceed to publication. Now, about the formal vote stage, it's kind of the same process. So after the inquiry, the TC, the technical body, will consider the comments from the inquiry ballot, as well as the HAS consultant comments received at inquiry, so during the inquiry confirmatory assessment. And the draft, together with the annexes, will be revised. Then all those elements, revised draft, revised annexes, filled in, again, common checklist, and all supporting documents shall be sent to CCMC for the pre-formal vote quality check. So as I was saying earlier, we have two quality checks, one at the very beginning on the mature draft, and one now at the beginning of the formal vote stage. So all the needed elements sent to HSC at sen@senelec.eu. For the quality check, same thing. Quality check shall be performed within 15 working days, and the clock starts when we have all the needed elements for the quality check to be performed. We send an email to the technical body officer when the quality check is ready, with the outcome of the quality check and the explanation of what we found. The technical body has 4 weeks to consider the comments and update what is needed to be updated, undated normative references, for example. At this stage, I guess we will not have any more undated normative references, but just an example. Same thing for any item that are not considered by the TC. The TC should justify it in the comments. Then, following the 4 weeks, once everything updated, the documents shall be sent back to hsc@senelec.eu with all the documents, common checklist, and so on, for the assessment request. Then we make the assessment. We request the assessment to the harmonized standard contractor. It could be EY or the one for eco-design. And when the assessment report is ready, hopefully within the 35 days, the assessment report is sent to the technical body officer for him or her to share it with the work group. So if the pre-formal vote draft assessment is compliant, all good, joy, celebration, then the TC delivers the pre-formal vote draft through the submission interface, and then the formal vote ballot will start. As you remember, with the timeline of the complete development, you remember that all the assessments, the assessment through the HAS consultant, I would say, are done before the formal vote ballot. So here, if we have a pre-formal vote compliant assessment, all good, the document can be submitted through the submission interface for the formal vote ballot. If there's a lack of compliance at pre-formal vote, there are several options. Buckle up, we have many things here. So the standard development process is put on hold. Again, the idea here is to try to fix everything, even if it implies technical changes, fix everything before the formal vote ballot, so that when the formal vote ballot starts, from an assessment point of view, the standard is good to go, and then we have higher chances of offering a compliant harmonized standard. The TC shall do its utmost to resolve any issues and ensure that the PM in charge of your TC is informed of what you think is the best way forward. And of course, if you have questions or doubts, please contact your CCMC project manager. She or he will be very happy to support you. Of course, in case of lack of compliance, you are very much encouraged to ask for a meeting with the HAS consultant to clarify any last points that will help you address the remaining comments. So following a lack of compliance, there are different options possible in case of lack of compliance here. So within the 7 weeks after the reception of the assessment, you should inform us, CCMC, your project manager, on the chosen way forward. We will see now the different options. So following a pre-formal vote lack of compliance, option 1, no last confirmatory assessment. You remember that the last confirmatory assessment is there optionally only in case of lack of compliance at formal vote, but it could be that you received the lack of compliance at formal vote, but the comments you received are easily addressable, and you don't need to have an LCA. For example, normative reference, I come back to it again. If for whatever reason you still have one normative reference that is not dated, for example, you had to add one during the formal vote drafting, and you forgot to date it, it's very unlikely, but let's say it can happen. Then obviously, if you have only one comment about an undated normative reference, you don't need to go for an LCA. You can just date it and proceed and explain that you have addressed the comment from the HAS consultant. So exactly what I was saying, given the nature of the comments, you can address it without requesting the LCA. So then we can proceed to formal vote, and then same thing, you have to deliver through the submission interface all the documents needed for the ballot. So the reworked draft in track changes, showing the changes and showing how you addressed the last comments. Again, the comment checklist to make sure that you have checked the standard, the filled-in table of comments from the previous assessment, and all the supporting documents for your draft. Second option, it's the last confirmatory assessment that is needed. More or less the same thing. You submit through the submission interface all the supporting documents, but then in the submission interface, you have to mention that you need a last confirmatory assessment. And again, here I would invite you to really be in contact with your CCMC project manager and explain your way forward, what you want to do, so that if there's something missing in the submission interface, at least he or she knows that for this work item submitted on the submission interface, the work item has to go through a last confirmatory assessment. And so we will request the last confirmatory assessment. So yeah, this part here. And same thing, 35 days for the assessment to be delivered. And if compliant, the formal vote ballot will resume. If the LCA is lack of compliance, we have again other options. But we really, really hope that, yeah, by the time we reach this stage, with again all the checks done before your self-assessment using the quality check or CCMC quality check, at this stage 3 assessments done by the HAS consultant, we hope that this case will be really exceptional. Still, if there's a lack of compliance on the LCA, you have to define and agree on the way forward, and then of course inform your CCMC project manager. Revise the draft to address the final comments, or proceed with option 3 or 4 within still the 7 weeks in total. So now we'll go to the last options. Option 3, that is exceptional. So if for whatever reason the comments received from the HAS consultant, if you think that those comments are not okay, I mean, if we don't get an agreement between the TC and the HAS consultant, and you don't succeed to solve the comments, then a meeting can be organized between the TC, the HAS consultant, and the European Commission, the desk officer. We call it EC HAS Technical Body Concerted Group, and it's a meeting to resolve, I would say, a dispute. So if you have very divergent views from the TC and from the HAS consultant, it can be on some technical aspect, and we have totally diverging views. The desk officer, the EC desk officer, can be there to be maybe not a referee, but okay, you can discuss it with the desk officer. Again, this should be exceptional. And this, by the way, was one of the outcomes as well that was discussed within the ESO's EC task force, where the common checklist and the innovative process were discussed and drafted. If the remaining comments are resolved, then the elements should be submitted through the submission interface for formal votes. And so same thing here, the reworked draft in track changes, showing the changes made to address the comments. And same thing, I would repeat, please be in touch with your CCMC project manager, because this work item, if a work item in this scenario, it means that it will have received officially a lack of compliant assessment. So if you succeed to address the final comments officially in the database, it will be still considered as a lack of compliance. But because you probably will be able to address the comments, we will offer it for citation. But so it's very important for you to be in touch with your CCMC project manager so that she or he knows that even though it is officially lack of compliance, but it's good still to be offered for citation. And the last issues, the last comments were addressed and resolved. If the remaining comments are not resolved, then there's option 4. And this one, the way forward is to either unlink the standard temporarily from legislation, meaning remove the link, and initiate an amendment or a revision in order to resolve the lack of compliant assessment. For Senelec, there's a way to do that by having common modifications. And by the way, for Senelec, I would invite you from the very beginning, so from the mature draft assessment, if you already see that, so this is not for homegrown, this is for parallel work, but so I'm already going a bit ahead. For parallel work, if you already see from the very beginning that you will have difficulties to address the comments on the international draft, please consider going directly to common modifications. And then the other option is to unlink the reference permanently from the legislation. And if the work item was listed in a standardization request, then the European Commission will need to be notified about that decision. But then same thing here, please be in close contact with your CCMC project manager so that we are aware of that and we are able to inform the Commission if needed. Voilà. So yeah, last option, abandon the project, but okay, same thing, we will need to inform the Commission. This one is quite exceptional as well. Yeah. So as said at the beginning, the innovative process is for homegrown harmonized standards for new work items launched for approval as of October 1st. But what's happening for ongoing projects? So this means that actually we have two processes in parallel for harmonized standards. We have the innovative process that is just starting now. And in parallel, we have the classical, I would say, harmonized standard process for the others. And so two processes in parallel. So for the ongoing projects that are not yet under the innovative process, it was in the BT decision. The technical bodies are invited to come to us, to the harmonized standard compliance team, to request a quality check on ongoing projects that are not yet submitted to inquiry or formal vote. So if the ballot did not start, if you still have time to consider our comments, please come to us. We will be very happy to perform a quality check, and it can be a good exercise for you so that we train and we test a part of the process. So it's not the complete innovative process, but it's just the part of the process. And again, this can help you identify elements in the draft or in the annexes that could eventually lead to a lack of compliant assessment. So please contact us by email. And same thing, we will perform the quality check in 15 working days. So again, it can be either the harmonized standard compliance team that performs the quality check or your CCMC project manager. We are at the end and we can see some key takeaways of the presentation, except if you have questions before going to the key takeaways. Otherwise, I will go. Yeah. So key takeaways. I was just saying we have two different processes for homegrown standards and homegrown harmonized standards. But yeah, so it's not exactly what I was saying, but we have de facto two different processes. For homegrown, not harmonized standards, it's the usual process, as you know. But for homegrown harmonized standards, for new work items launched for approval as of October 1st, there is this new innovative process. Mandatory for new work items launched for approval as of October 1st. So it means that soon, if you launched a new work item for approval, it will be approved soon, and it means that it falls within the new innovative process. This process has been agreed with the EC as well, DG Energy. So it's not only the HAS assessment, but it's the assessment with the VHK, who is the other company who is doing the assessment for eco-design standards. As said, there's a maximum of four assessments for each work item as before, but now, again, one of the main pillars of the new innovative process, the idea is to shift the efforts at the beginning of the process to avoid being blocked at the very end. The quality check, the other main pillar of this new innovative process that is there to help you identify early, I mean, on the mature draft and on the pre-formal vote, but as early as possible, help you identify elements that could potentially lead to a lack of compliance. So the combination of the quality check, your self-assessment using the common checklist that again is the same document that the HAS consultant will use for their assessment, and the right timing, we hope that will help improve the very low compliance ratio we have today. As I was saying at the beginning, unfortunately for now, it's a two-steps approach. So we will have a lot of manual exchanges. We know it's not efficient. We will lose time and we have to make sure that we don't lose documents. But because of the low compliance ratio, we think it's important to start the process as soon as we can. And then the IT part will catch up later. For the new work item, foresee enough time, plan 50 weeks for the stage A. And then if you have a lack of compliance at a confirmatory inquiry, go for a 9 months tolerance. BTs, of course, will monitor the success of this new process. So it's the very first time we do this. It's new for you, for us as well. So we are really focusing on continuous improvement. We will all learn doing it, and BT will monitor. And eventually, we will need to make some small adjustments, but we will keep you informed anyway. And the process for work for harmonized standard under parallel development is currently being developed. We have very close contact with ISO and IEC, and as Alberto was saying earlier, we have this week a meeting with the IT guys from IEC, where we will discuss the practical technical implementation of the process, and then we will go to BT for asking for the approval of this new process. And anyway, we will keep you updated and we will organize a training dedicated to that. And that was it. Last slide, inviting you to check some useful content we have. Webinar on drafting guidance, very useful. Guidance documents on the normative references. You can find it on the SEN and the SENELEC BOSS. There was a webinar presenting the new common checklist that I did in June together with my colleague Nuno Pargana. And in 2 weeks, we have another webinar dedicated to the innovative process for homegrown. So it's more or less the same content as today. There's a link to register to it. We'll be very happy to see you there again. And that was it. That was my last slide. So thank you very much for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was quite a lot of information and eye-opening. 2 very quick questions. One, any delays as a result of the assessments not coming back in time will not eat up into the overall period, and Projects Online will reflect that and not throw up warnings as it does now because you've lost the time. And second question, previously we could use the live link platform to see when assessments were requested. At this time, I don't think that information is visible to TC officers at all.
It's a good point about Projects Online. Yes, you can see on Projects Online today